Lovely. Hello, everybody. I'm glad that you're joining us. So yes, today's topic is Maps, Microsoft Azure Peering Service. Let me start with sharing my screen. And yes, as Holly mentioned, feel free to add any questions using the Q&A function, and we'll go through them at the end. We'll leave time at the end to go through them. So, Maps. What is Maps all about, and why do we need it, and why do we offer it? So it's let's start first with the name. It's a bit confusing since Microsoft put Azure into the name, although it doesn't really have anything directly to do with Azure. It is really Microsoft Peering Service. This is how Microsoft describes it. It's a peering service, and it's a service that allows you to enhance your connectivity to all of the public-facing Microsoft services, which I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're joining us here, are using one or more of those. That could be you're using the Microsoft 365 suite, you're using Dynamics 365, or any of the other software as a service applications that Microsoft offers. Or you might have workloads in Azure, but you're not using ExpressRoute, but you just want to make sure you have the best possible public connectivity into Microsoft's network. That is what Azure is about. What is it really? Well, it just gives you direct peering with AS8075. It is managed by the IXP, and the IXP, in this case LINX, will have direct connections with Microsoft, and we'll cover all of that in much more detail as we go through. So let me start with trying to remove some confusion about questions which might come up. Microsoft has a number of AS numbers. The two main ones that you see on the outside is 8075. That's Microsoft's public network. That is their main AS number. If you're using ExpressRoute or using Azure, meaning you have compute instance, storage instances within the Azure network, and if you're using ExpressRoute or similar services, the S number that you will see is 12076. And that's only available through those direct connection, and it's slight different use case. But if you would have any peering with Microsoft, or if you get access to Microsoft through your internet service provider, even if you only have direct internet access, that traffic all passes through 8075. That is the main public AS number of Microsoft. So Maps is all about 8075. It gives you direct peering with that AS number, which means you will, through Maps, you will get all of the prefixes from Microsoft, all of their public-facing IP blocks. You can use that even if you're using Azure. You have compute platforms within Azure, but you don't use ExpressRoute, but you just use either an IPsec tunnel or an SD-WAN to get it. Obviously, again, you will want to have that direct connectivity, so that would use 8075. How does it look from a technical point of view? Well, it is really just peering with Microsoft, and there's some differences and some quite important ones, but it will give you direct peering between your network and Microsoft's network. It always is a fully resilient setup, so anybody who offers Maps, and that certainly is true for us, our recommendation is that if you use Maps, we heavily recommend that you have 2 resilient connections into our network. We allow you to kind of compromise on that by using a single one, but our connection with Microsoft will always be resilient, meaning we will always have at least 2 physical connections into Microsoft. And we'll come back. There are root servers involved, so we'll talk about that, but it's always by default fully resilient. We offer it from bandwidth bandwidth starting at as low as 50 megabits per second, and we can go up to 10 gig of bandwidth for the service. And with LINX, you can actually even use our self-service functionality through our portal, which really means if you already have a port with LINX, you can set it up within a couple of minutes in an ideal situation. So it's a very quick option to get that direct peering if you need it. From Microsoft point of view, the main difference is if you just have peering with Microsoft and in any of the many locations, they exit their traffic at the closest exit point on their network, meaning have the traffic leave their network as soon as possible, which might not always be ideal. If you're using maps, Microsoft always makes sure that it exits at the closest point to your network, especially if you're using maps in parallel with other connectivity to Microsoft. It will prefer maps, and it will keep it on the Microsoft network, meaning under their control as long as possible. In the cases of if you're using our London connection or any of the others, it will only leave the Microsoft network at the access point to us, and from there it's going to go directly to you. So how does it work? How is it actually set up on the Microsoft on Microsoft side? It's very simple. It's just direct connections. How does it work on our own network? How is it technically set up, and how does it work? The way it is done, we're actually using a service that is anyway available also to our members, which is a closed user group, which is really just a private layer 2 instance that is dedicated for this purpose. And that closed user group exists on all of the peering lands where Maps is available, and we'll cover those in a second. That closed user group has two root servers connected to it that are, again, dedicated to the map setup. They are not in use for anything else. And as I mentioned, there's two of them. We host them in different sites on our network for maximum resiliency. And it will have two connections, physical direct connections to Microsoft in that local area. In the case, this is the example of LON 1, we connect to Microsoft in Equinix over in Slough and in Telehouse in the Docklands. So again, resilient connectivity there. The root servers have direct BGP sessions with 8075 with Microsoft. If a member uses Maps, buys the connection into that closed user group, as shown here, there could be many members connected. You as a member, you will establish a BGP session with our root server, and the root server ASN is actually hidden, so it's the exact same behavior as when you use any root servers on any internet exchange. The only difference on the root server setup here versus normal traditional IXP root servers, your prefixes will only get announced to Microsoft, and the only prefixes that you will receive through that BGP session will be the Microsoft prefixes. In our scenario, you can configure it either on one of your existing ports, and in that case, it will get presented to you as a separate VLAN, as a separate sub interface on an existing port with other services that you might be using, or you can use a dedicated port for this. For each of the connections that, as I said, can be physically if it's dedicated port or logical VLAN interface. We allocate you an IP address out of that dedicated Maps closed user group. So it looks very similar to how you connect to peering LAN. You establish the BGP sessions with the root servers. We obviously highly recommend that you establish one with each one of the root servers. And you announce your prefixes to the root server. That's as simple as it is. It is straightforward, and it also is already one benefit, since once you have done this, you will have direct peering with Microsoft. And the main difference is you didn't even have to talk to Microsoft at all in this whole process. You can do it all through LINX. You don't have to wait for anybody anywhere else. It will just work, and as the whole provisioning process is fully automated, it can happen in a very short period of time. So what's different? Why wouldn't I just do peering, especially if I'm on a LAN where Microsoft is available? And Microsoft has an open peering policy. They will peer with pretty much anybody who asks, but like many networks, they have a peering policy which can be quite strict, and it's also quite an interesting one, since they do use public peering over exchanges, but there are some minimum requirements, meaning they will only peer with you if you have at least a 10 gig connection to the exchange, and that those connections should not be used above 50%. They also require you to have at least 500 megabits per second of traffic, but it should be less than 2 gig. So it's kind of a rather small area where you have to fit in order to qualify for peering with them. If your traffic is more than 2 gig, they actually ask you to do direct peering, private peering over dedicated ports, which again, for smaller networks, that might not be that easy to do, since if you want private peering, direct peering with Microsoft, they only offer 100 gig ports. You need to have minimum 2 ports, ideally in 2 different locations, which again, for smaller networks might not always be possible, and actually also might become expensive, even if only from an equipment point of view. And especially direct peering is really preferably for Microsoft only available to service providers and not really to end customers, i.e. if you're an enterprise network, they really don't, they're less likely to allow you to go ahead. So there's a lot of, even though it is an open peering policy, there are a lot of constraints, which means not everybody will be available to get that direct peering with Microsoft. But there's other benefits. As you probably all know, if you use public peering on traditional peering on an IXP, or private peering, anything that uses the internet as such, really the smallest prefix that traditionally gets allowed, unless you do special agreements, is really a /24, meaning 255 IP addresses. And again, if we're looking at the use case of smaller networks, even down to enterprise networks, you might not have a /24, and these days it could actually be fairly expensive to buy a /24 for that reason, especially on IPv4, obviously. So Maps allows you to announce prefixes as small as a /32. And still have that benefit of having that direct connection to Microsoft. This clearly opens it up to many more networks, even networks which really traditionally couldn't make use of peering and would have always to rely on their service provider to do it with them. We have a couple of members who are connected to are actually connected to some of our partners, where it's the partner who does the setup for them, and actually even the partner allocates them a /29 or a small block as part of a managed service to allow them to make use of the direct peering with Microsoft through maps. There's some other benefits if you want to. You can set yourself up on the Azure portal if you are not already, and Microsoft provides you some additional data about your peering with them through maps. You will see the availability of the BGP sessions where they learn the prefixes from, which in the end are the prefix with the root, the BGP sessions with the root servers. You have some basic statistics about packet drops. If the BGP sessions flapped, it shows you latency between them and your endpoints for the different prefixes, and it will log if a prefix has disappeared and reappears. And again, there is no cost for enabling that. You can do that at any point in time. From what we see, a lot of customers don't really don't necessarily use it. It's not a requirement that you set it up on the Azure portal. The only situation where it is a requirement, if you want to announce prefixes that are smaller than /24, you have to register those prefixes in the Azure portal. So what happens is when we set the sessions up, when we set the service up, we set your ASN up on the Azure portal linked to the map service, and that basically generates a prefix key that you then can use to log into the portal and register your prefixes against that key. And as soon as you do that, they will get accepted by Microsoft. So that's the only scenario where you actually have to use the Azure portal to do it. If your prefixes are /24 or larger, you don't. If you there's no requirement for you to touch the Azure portal at any point in time. So where is it currently available? So we started launching maps a couple of years back. We started in London on our Lon 1 LAN. And again, as I mentioned before, we will only offer it in locations where we locally in that region, in that city, in that metro area, where we can have that direct connection with Microsoft, to make sure again that as part of this service, your connection to Microsoft's network is as direct and as short as possible. So we started on LAN 1. We expanded it not too long ago to our LANs in Manchester, which means especially if you're a UK network, you now have 2 different cities where you can have that direct connection, which allows you to even further enhance your resiliency. If your network is present in both of those areas, you can use connections there to further enhance it. And we also offer it in our Northern Virginia exchange. And we're currently in the final steps of also setting it up on the latest exchange that we launched, which is LINX Nairobi in Kenya. So we're in the final steps of getting the setup at our end and the connections to Microsoft brought live, and we expect that that's going to happen over the next probably over the next 2 months if everything goes as expected. We also have a number of the service is available to all of our resellers, connections partners. We have a number of them who have started to offer it to their customers. So if you're not directly connected to any of our locations, our connections partners can help you to still reach it in the exchange nearest to you where they are present. And we do think there is a lot of benefit also for partners to build that service into their offerings, especially if they are partners who offer a managed service to some of their customers. As I said, we have a couple of examples where the partner, to a certain degree, manages the service for the end customer. How can you order it? In the end, it's very similar. It's very simple, like most of our services. There might be somebody who disagrees what's simple and what isn't, but you can order it if you're already a LINX member. You can order it through the LINX portal. You see, one always says shouldn't do any live demos, but this is a view of our portal. At the moment, I'm logged in as myself. Like any of our services, you just go to the orders tab, you request a new service. You will have the choice of all. So this is a port-based, what we call port-based service, meaning it gets delivered over a port. And you will see the Microsoft Azure Peering Service. As I said, currently available on 3 of our peering lands, 3 of our fabrics. For this example, picking LON 1. You can choose your bandwidth. Let's leave it at 50 meg. The pricing will update accordingly if you change it. And as I mentioned before, you can either deliver it on one of your existing ports if there's bandwidth available. Obviously, if you want to use an existing port, you need to set it up as a trunk port, so .1Q encapsulation. You can always go and change one of your existing ports. But for now, let's just pick this one as an example. I'm not going to go through the whole order, but just to give you an idea, show you an idea. Once you have selected the port, you can, of course, as I said before, you can also, as part of the order a new port at the same time. On the next step, it's gonna ask you to choose your AS number. Most of you will only see one AS number there. There is a checkbox here which really allows you to tell us if you plan on announcing more specific prefixes, so smaller than /24. You just add this checkbox. That just means that our NOC, once the order has come through, that they are aware that you will need the prefix key, so they will make sure that they provide that prefix key to you as part of the provisioning. You just select the VLAN ID, and that's the VLAN ID that it's going to be presented at your end on your port. You can choose it with 1 or 2 exceptions which are reserved, but otherwise you have free choice of the VLAN ID, the MAC address of the router at your end, as always. And that's really all the information that is needed to set it up. In the next step, you can just add an additional reference to you and so on. You can also, at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we highly recommend that you set it up in a resilient way, that you have 2 connections to it. It will allow you to order it. It will always, at least we always, as a minimum, recommend that you set up BGP sessions with both of our root servers, so your prefixes get learned into Microsoft across both of them. But in an ideal way, we ask you to have it delivered over 2 separate ports. The order form allows you here straight away to do that as a next step. So it will ask you, okay, for the second connection, do you want it delivered on a different port, or order an additional port as part of the same order? And that's really all there is about setting it up. Once the order has gone through our systems, as I said, the process is pretty much fully automated, and you will get the confirmation once the service is delivered. If you are announcing more specific prefixes, it then means that you will need to go to the Azure portal and add your prefixes linked to the prefix key that we have provided. And you will see in the portal as soon as they get accepted by Microsoft. If you don't, if you only announce /24s, /23s or larger, there is nothing else you have to do. As soon as you configure the BGP sessions and announce the prefixes, you will start to learn the prefixes from Microsoft's network, and your prefixes will get announced to Microsoft and get accepted. We do the standard prefix validation in the same way that we do it on our normal root service, i.e. the prefix need to be valid. They need to have a route object. If you're using RPKI, they need to have a SOA which is linked to your ASN. So we do the check of the ASN and if there's a root object there. So those standard validations are the same here in this case. And that is really how quick and how simple it is to order the service, to set it up, and go through it. And that covers pretty much the majority of the process and what Maps is. And I can easily go through any of the topics and provide you more information about it. If there are any questions about it, we can certainly go through all of these. So let me go back to my slides and open the room up for questions if we have any. If we don't have any, that brings us in that case already to the end of this session for today. You can of course always, my email address is there, or of course you can contact us through any of the other ways. Ask any questions at any point. As Holly mentioned, we're going to publish the video as well at a later stage, so feel free to also use to come back to this and ask any questions at a later point.